Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Samurai Goddess. The Goddess Next Door takes on Kung Fu killers in this action-packed martial arts Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Samurai Goddess in paperback and e-readers today. A lot of people on social media have been asking me to do a review of Netflix's Luke Cage since it came out last year. Unfortunately, due to my long-term unemployment, I have not had the financial resources to go out here and pick up home internet access to stream the series or to purchase a Netflix subscription. However, a family member offered me the use of their Netflix account to take a look at the Luke Cage series, and after reviewing the series, I can say that this is one of the best adaptations of a Marvel Comics character and the best adaptation of a black superhero, period. What makes Netflix's Luke Cage unique is that it's not just a adaptation of a superhero like an Iron Man or a Captain America that tries to translate the character from page to screen, but this is a reinvention of the character. And what makes this reinvention of the character unique is that the people doing the reimagining of Luke Cage are black men. And because black men are reimagining this character, we're seeing this character from the perception of black men and the narrative of black men. This is black men telling the story of themselves, but using the Luke Cage character to do it. Because when we look at this Luke Cage character in this reinvention, it is a story of a black man discovering what is important about being a black man and the importance of the role of the black man in the black community. And that's a story that can only be told by black men. And I'm glad that the production company got the opportunity to do this because we rarely ever get an opportunity to see black men tell their stories in media. In most cases, whenever there is a story put out here in media, we get a story presented from a black feminist perspective. But Netflix's Luke Cage comes from a black male perspective, and in that story, we get a really balanced picture of black men and, moreover, the entire black community. Now, when we are introduced to Carl Lucas in the Netflix Luke Cage series, in some ways, he's like the character from Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. He's a man hiding in the shadows, trying to make a way for himself in a world that's pretty much chaotic. And this is because he's running away from prison after being framed for a crime he didn't commit, sentenced to prison in Georgia, and now he's trying to pick up the pieces of his life. And this is another thing I really liked about this reinvention of Luke Cage. It gives us a more thorough story, a more comprehensive story, and a more balanced story than any of the Marvel comics, because I own a copy of Luke Cage Hero for Hire #1. And in Luke Cage Hero for Hire #1, they just show him as some sort of street guy who's in the hustles. But in this series, we see a more richer, more multi-dimensional character. This Carl Lucas is a guy who was a police officer from Georgia, and he's a guy who pretty much has a background in law enforcement. He's a guy who's a bit more, conscientious. He's a bit more honest, and he's got more content to his character, and it's that content of his character and those core values that he has that are the foundations for what makes him a hero, because he's a good man on the inside. In some ways, he's like Captain America. It's who he is on the inside that makes him a hero, not just he's a hero because he got this Power Man process. What makes him powerful, again, is like Captain America. It's the content of his character. Now, this Luke Cage character is, again, trying to rebuild his life. And in some ways, he kind of reminds me of my own father when he first came here from North Carolina. He's the kind of guy, he's working 2 jobs just to pay his bills. One is at Pop's barbershop, just sweeping and mopping and washing towels. The other is as a dishwasher at Harlem's Paradise. And both of these jobs pretty much introduce us to the villains, who are, in contrast, two sides of the same coin. They're both presenting themselves as good people, but in actuality, both of these black people are exploiting the community. And that's another thing that I liked about this series is that it presented the black villains in a great way of contrast as being two sides of the same coin. And they present the black villains not just as stereotype pimps black Cottonmouth was in the comics, or a big mammy like Black Mariah was in the comics. But in this reinvention, we see them as some of the two deadliest predators in the black community. One is your gangster or thug, which is what Cottonmouth Stokes is, and the other is the most dangerous of all, the black liberal politician, which is what Mariah Dillard is. Your Mariah Dillard is one of the deadliest people in this Luke Cage series, and I like the way they presented that because we often think that the politician is the least dangerous person, but they're the most dangerous person because Democratic politicians have really done nothing for black people. Now, your Lynn Cottonmouth Stokes looks more dangerous on the outside, but what makes the Mariah Dillard character more dangerous is the subtle way she does things. Now, both of them, again, are exploiting people through their venues. Your Leon Cottonmouth Stokes through his Harlem's Paradise, and in contrast, your Mariah Dillard through her Crispus Attucks community center. Both of them are using the monies that they get to exploit the community, and everything in Luke Cage's world starts to become chaotic because of these two and their plans for exploiting the community. Now, your Cottonmouth Stokes has taken money from his cousin to go buy weapons, and they wanted to do a weapons deal. Unfortunately, some of the underlings, one working at Harlem's Paradise, the other one working at Pop's Barbershop, participate in a robbery. And thanks to in the aftermath of this robbery, things are heating up in the community. And Luke doesn't want to get involved, but he reluctantly becomes involved when he sees things becoming more and more violent in his community. And he doesn't become a hero for hire. He becomes a responsible and conscientious black man looking to protect his community from the predators who seek to plague it. And those predators are from within. And this goes back to something a YouTuber named David Carroll talked about in the black community. Now, he said, and I know this to be a fact, that the Negro's enemy isn't mostly white people, it's the black people in the black community. And that's something we see in this Luke Cage series presented to us, that these are the enemy of the black community are the people in the black community. And what makes them dangerous is that they have this drive to be greedy and make money at the expense of their own people. Because your Mariah Crawford and your Cottonmouth Stokes both want to make money at the expense of black people. They have no regard for human life, and they could care less about whoever lives or dies as long as they can continue making money off people. Now, your Luke Cage is he's a quiet, soft-spoken, conscientious man with good values, and he wants to go out of his way to protect his community from these predators. So he comes in and he's starting to say that he's got the community, because what they're trying to say in this series is that black men have to step up and protect the community, because if they don't, a lot of people are going to lose their lives. And sadly, in this series, a lot of people lose their lives because there aren't enough men to go out and protect the community. Now, what Pops does in the barbershop is he is a teacher of culture, and he teaches Luke Cage things that he would need to know about how to protect his community. And I like seeing that in this series because we rarely ever get to see, the role of places like the barbershop, because the barbershop is core to black culture. I can remember my trips to the barbershop with my father, back in the 1980s, back in Frederick Douglass Boulevard, and how that shaped me, because that's how men learned how to socialize. That's how men learned how to function, in the black community. And I can remember going to Jerry's Dinner on 167th Street in the Bronx and learning further there. And the barbershop is a core foundation to Luke learning about the values of the community and the role of black men in the community. And I really like seeing that in this series because it clearly showed me that this producer understood black culture and he understood the history behind a lot of what went on in black culture, because that's one of the things that makes this Luke Cage series great. That in this adaptation, instead of just making it about superheroes, they fuse so much black history and black culture into this series that you learn more about, the black community overall, and you learn about the roles of people in the black community. So it's just not some guy in a costume beating up people. It's literally like partial a history lesson. This is something I try to do myself with books in the ISIS series, and what I did heavily in the first ISIS book. I tried to fuse that African American history and Egyptian mythology together in a fantasy series, and it was great to see this presented on screen. And it's also something I did, with the Temptation of John Haynes, where I pretty much fused that African American fantasy again with black history and black culture. And watching Luke Cage really inspired me and made me see that it is possible to present, this type of picture on screen for African Americans to see, and that it can be presented in a way that pretty much makes the character new for new audiences and makes them fresh for new audiences, because Netflix's Luke Cage really does an amazing job of taking this character and reinventing them for the 21st century. And it does a great job of bringing black culture back to black people and reconnecting people with black culture. Most importantly, reconnecting people with what black manhood is, black masculinity is, and why this is important to black culture. There's just so much I like about this series, and I like seeing a positive portrayal of a black man. I like seeing a positive image of a black man. And I like seeing a balanced picture of the black community. This is something I usually don't see in mainstream media today. Most media today, they don't try to make an effort to give us this type of picture. I mean, the last time I really saw a picture this balanced of African Americans in media was way back with the Cosby Show back in the 1984, and when I started seeing black films by people like Spike Lee, Robert Townsend, and many others during the late 1980s and early 1990s. We really haven't gotten this type of picture of black people in media in over, I say, almost 20 years. I mean, we have not seen this, and I can understand why this series crashed Netflix's server, because in some ways it was like the second coming of the Cosby Show, because we don't get to see these type of images of black people so far. I mean, over the last 20 some odd years, I have seen so much cooning and buffooning that I can understand why so many people went to go see this series, because this is one of the most balanced portrayals of black men in media. This is one of the most intelligent portrayals of black men in media. And when I look at and I compare him to other superheroes in media, Luke Cage pretty much stands at the top of the mountain, because when I look at the way Mr. Terrific was turned into a bumbling, stumbling idiot, the way the Guardian was put in the friend zone, and the way Chuck Clayton was turned into a black brute, Luke Cage pretty much is someone we really need to appreciate and value, because this type of portrayal of black men is something that sadly these days is the exception, not the rule. Now, people in the 70s, they got this as the standard, but we don't get this as the standard. And I'd like to see more, you know, people present more images of black men like this in media, because I'd like to see more Luke Cages, because that's what black men are. That's who black men really are. And that's not an image we usually get in black feminist media or white liberal media. And watching this series really made me appreciate how important it is for black men to control their own image. Because when black men control their own image, we get a Luke Cage who is a protector of his community. But when white liberals control the community, the narrative, we get Chuck Clayton the brute, and we get Mr. Terrific the bumbling, stumbling idiot. So I really appreciated seeing that, because this proves a point that I made about those who control the money control the media, and those who control the money control the narrative. And the black men who produced Netflix's Luke Cage control the media and they control the narrative, and they told a story about black men and black manhood that pretty much presents black males as they are, not how any white liberals and black feminists see them. And that picture, again, is completely different than the image we usually get in traditional mainstream media. That's why I really appreciate this series. That's why I really enjoy watching this series, and this is why I can recommend this series, because this series presents black men in a positive light. Moreover, it presents black women in a positive light. When you look at Netflix's Luke Cage, we see black men pursuing relationships with black women. Luke Cage pretty much is being pursued by black women, and he's going after black women. We see Luke Cage having relationships with Misty Knight, Reva Connors, and I forget her name, the other woman, Clara Temple. And we see that he's not having some sort of skin tone preference. He's dealing with women from a spectrum of beauty. He's dealing with light-skinned women, biracial women, and even dark-skinned women. So it pretty much proves another point that I watch many YouTubers talk about regarding black men, that they will pursue whoever pursues them. And it also proves another point when I was watching it, the first couple episodes of Luke Cage, that usually a woman knows who she's interested in within 5 seconds of looking at him. Because when we look at the scene between Misty Knight and Luke Cage in Harlem's Paradise, that proved the point another YouTuber, Mad Voodoo Man, the Iceman, told me about regarding women on his YouTube videos. And it was great to see many of the points that black men talk about in their videos pretty much confirmed watching this series. And this is another reason why, again, you guys need to really watch this series, because, again, we're getting a story from a black male perspective. We're getting a story told from a black male perspective. And that story pretty much refutes a lot of the ideas about black men presented in the mainstream media. Now, the production values on this Netflix Luke Cage series are top notch. They're just amazing. The visuals are strong. The camera work is strong, and the acting is incredible. The acting on this show, it's some of the best I have seen from a Marvel Studios production so far. I mean, I've seen a lot of acting in the Marvel Studios films. It's been good, but this one takes it to another level. And when I watch this series, it's like watching an epic movie. And this is something that I usually don't see in most Marvel Studios films. Most Marvel Studios films, they have struggled in the third act, but this series has been rock solid as I've seen so far. And this is something I really like seeing. And a lot of people, they complain that this series is too black, but I don't see it as too black at all. What I see in this series is a complete presentation of black culture and black history. It presents a balanced picture of black culture and black history. And the big problem that with most people in today is that they haven't seen a balanced picture of black people and black lives in over 20 years. I mean, back in the 1980s, when I was growing up, men like Spike Lee, Robert Townsend, and Bill Cosby gave us this picture all the time in the late 80s and early 90s. Unfortunately, many who grew up after the O.J. Simpson trial have not gotten black media like this, because people like Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey, Shonda Rhimes, and Lee Daniels presented us with a feminist view of black history and black culture, presented us with stories from a black feminist perspective, and we haven't really gotten that balanced picture, because they control their media and they use their money to tell stories from their narrative. And because they told their stories from their narrative, we haven't gotten a counterpoint. And Luke Cage really is a counterpoint. And this series is not too black, really, when you think about it, because, again, you have black men taking this character created by white people and telling their story. So it's definitely not too black. But the thing is that we're getting a picture from a different perspective. And because many people are used to the black feminist and white liberal version of black, they're uncomfortable seeing this image of black. I'm not uncomfortable with it because I grew up with it, So it's not a problem for me. But a lot of other people, they have a problem with this series, and I don't. I think this series is perfectly balanced. It's well done. It's rock solid. And again, I highly recommend this series. And if I ever had the money, this would be the production company I would go out to hire to do the Temptation of John Haynes, because I look at the way they did Luke Cage in their adaptation, and it would be perfect. If I ever did a Temptation of John Haynes movie, these guys would be the ones I would hire. The visuals are just the way I would do it, and the way I would want it to be done. And that's when I look at this production, it just inspires me and makes me think about what a John Haynes would look like if it were presented on screen. Now, I really enjoy this Netflix Luke Cage series, and I recommend everybody go out and go see it. It is one of the best adaptations of a black superhero, and I'm hoping that it inspires more people to go out here and get behind the camera and to take their money and to create more positive images of African Americans on screen for other brothers and sisters to get a look at. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.